Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. We have a lot of ground to cover today. We have the big opening weekend of The Devil Wears Prada 2, both here domestically and around the world. We have the second weekend of Michael. We're checking in on the summer box office for the first time, and we're also going to take a look at where the box office stands so far this year, not just against 2025, but against the last decade of box office results. So a lot to dive into, and let's get right into it. With this past weekend's top 10, these are the final numbers, and The Devil Wears Prada 2 debuted as expected with a strong $76.7 million. It didn't necessarily exceed expectations, but given the budget of the film, this is going to be an easily profitable film and a great way to start off the summer movie season. Michael dropped 44% in week number 2, which is a strong hold. I said on last week's show it'd be interesting to see, because the week 1 audience was so young, whether it might have a bigger drop in week number 2, but the demographics evened out a little bit. Some of the older audience showed up, and it put a strong week 2 performance together. The Super Mario Galaxy movie in week number 5 came in a distant third place with $12.1 million. It has now broken the $400 million domestic barrier. Project Hail Mary continued to hold well in its 7th week, dropping 33.7% for an $8.5 million weekend. It's now at $318 million domestically. Hokum debuted at number 5. That's the latest horror film from Neon. It brought in $6.4 million. At number 6 was Andy Serkis's animated version of Animal Farm with $3.3 million. We're going to cover this movie a little bit more in depth in a minute. It set a low water mark for animated features by one particular metric. Lee Cronin's The Mummy dropped 60% to bring in $2.2 million. Deep Water debuted in 8th place at $2.1 million. And then at number 9, coming in under $1 million, was That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, the movie, Tears of the Azure Sea. Good gracious, what a title. $947,000 for that film. And the drama spends another week in the top 10, bringing in $908,000. It does not look like it's going to hit that $50 million domestic goal, because it lost a lot of theaters. It dropped 64.7% from last weekend and is available today to view at home. So the box office run for that movie is more or less done domestically. Dropping out of the top 10, we had basically a 50% turnover. Hoppers is out after 8 weeks. You, Me, and Tuscany out of the top 10 after 3 weeks. Mother Mary's out of the top 10 after just 1 week, as well as Over Your Dead Body and American Young Boy. A lot of new movies to get into the top 10. And when we look at this weekend versus the same weekend last year in 2025, we had a substantial increase for the first weekend of the summer box office season. We were up about 18% over the same weekend last year, which is when Thunderbolts kicked off the summer movie season. Of course, The Devil Wears Prada 2 had a lot to do with this with its strong debut, but Michael played a key part here in boosting the overall box office. Year to date, we're at about $2.78 billion, and as I said later in the show, we're going to look at the entire 2026 box office so far to see how we're doing in kind of a bigger picture kind of way. So let's look at some of the domestic top 10 movies one by one, and we'll start with The Devil Wears Prada 2. It put up the 4th best domestic opening weekend of the year. Believe it or not, it performed even better around the world. $76.7 million comes in just behind Project Hail Mary's $80.5 million. Michael, of course, last weekend had the 2nd best opening weekend of the year, and the Super Mario Galaxy movie right now, the only film so far in 2026 to break that $100 million domestic barrier on the opening weekend. Scream 7, now the 5th best opening of the year domestically. And when we look at overall domestic weekends, The Devil Wears Prada 2 also had the 4th best weekend of the year, behind the openings of Project Hail Mary, Michael, and the Super Mario Galaxy movie. The 2nd weekend of Super Mario Galaxy movie was the 5th best performance for any film this year, followed by the opening of Scream 7, the 2nd week of Project Hail Mary. The 2nd week of Michael goes down as the 8th best weekend for any movie domestically in 2026. Then we have the opening of Hoppers, and the 1st weekend of the year, which had Avatar Fire and Ash, bringing in $41.4 million. Meryl Streep has had a decades-long career in Hollywood, but she is still breaking records because The Devil Wears Prada 2 is a personal best for her at the box office as far as opening weekends domestically. It more than doubled the previous high water mark for her, which was Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. That movie opened to $34.9 million back in the summer of 2018. The Devil Wears Prada 2 decimated that at $76.7 million. Third place for Meryl Streep was Into the Woods back in 2015, although that movie opened on a Thursday during the holiday season. A Series of Unfortunate Events comes in fourth place, followed by the first Mamma Mia film back in the summer of 2008. Then we have the original Devil Wears Prada, which is Meryl Streep's sixth highest grossing opening weekend. Mary Poppins Returns comes in at number 7, although that movie opened on a Wednesday, again during the holiday season. It's Complicated is at number 8, Julie and Julia is at number 9, and then rounding out the top 10, we go back to 2004 with The Manchurian Candidate, which opened to $20 million. Somewhat coincidentally, Emily Blunt is a co-star with Meryl Streep in 4 of these films, the 2 Devil Wears Prada movies, Into the Woods and Mary Poppins Returns. So Emily Blunt and Meryl Streep, even across different franchises and film series, actually work pretty well together. They make some box office magic. On last week's show, I did kind of a deep dive into the demographics of who turned up to see Michael on its opening weekend, and I wanted to do that again for The Devil Wears Prada 2 because I found the results to be just as interesting. Now, I've said this on the show before, and I don't like to repeat myself. A lot of people ask why I repeat things, and one of the reasons why is that I get the same questions over and over oftentimes, and anytime that I share demographics, people say, well, how do you know these are reliable? Because I've never been asked this information when I go to the movies. So where does this come from? And this is basically statistical sampling that's done in different markets around the country. It's representative statistics. You take a small sample size that is from a deep enough and diverse enough population that you're confident that it represents the entire country. This is how demographic information has been taken for decades. I understand that most of you, if not all of you, have never been asked this information at the box office when you go see a movie, but the methods here are not new. So even if you have not personally been asked about this information, this is, I think, representative of the actual movie-going public. So let's look first at the age demographics for Michael versus The Devil Wears Prada 2. Last week, I was somewhat surprised at how young the audience was for Michael. 54% of Michael's audience in its opening weekend was under 35, 46% was over 35. We flipped that on its head for The Devil Wears Prada 2. According to figures that were shared on Sunday, 66% of the opening weekend audience for The Devil Wears Prada 2 was over 35, with 34% under 35. So the under 35 crowd driving Michael, the over 35 crowd driving Devil Wears Prada 2. When we look at it by ethnicity, the biggest audience for Michael was the Black audience with 38%, followed by Hispanic and Latino audiences at 26%, white audiences at 24%, Asians at 6%, and then other ethnicities at 5%. But it was somewhat different for The Devil Wears Prada 2. Black audiences only made up 12% of the ticket buying public. The Hispanic Latino percentage stayed about the same, 28% to Michael's 26%. But this film was driven largely by white audiences. 48% of the opening weekend audience were white, 7% were Asian. So we had 2 big opening weekends, but Devil Wears Prada 2 so far, much more driven by the older audience, much more driven by white audiences, and driven more by female audiences. Now, Michael had a very heavy skew toward women. 61% of the audience for Michael's opening weekend were women, 39% were men, but that number was even higher for The Devil Wears Prada 2. 75% of the opening weekend audience were women, 25% were men. So last week with Michael, we had an audience that was largely younger, much more diverse, and also driven by women at the box office. With The Devil Wears Prada, we had an older, whiter, but still very female-heavy audience. And I think that what this proves, and it's something I've said on the show many times before, is that when you provide entertainment for different groups of people, or that might attract different groups of people, everybody wins, because we're seeing success now from different audiences driving the box office to some of the best numbers that we've seen this year across multiple genres and bringing out different types of people. The idea of marketing a movie or steering it toward the typical moviegoer oftentimes just means you get retreads and stuff that feels tired. And I'm encouraged by what I've seen here because it means that there are a lot of different types of people, different kinds of people that are very anxious to get to the movies to see a movie that they enjoy. And we now have 2 films with The Devil Wears Prada 2 and Michael that have done well at the box office, that seem to have gotten pretty positive reception and are set up for some good results in the coming weeks. Michael is climbing up the all-time list for biopics of musicians domestically. It's already the second highest grossing music biopic behind Bohemian Rhapsody, which made $216.6 million. Michael is going to eclipse that by next week's show. I don't think there's any doubt as far as that goes. Straight Outta Compton's at number 3, followed by Elvis and Walk the Line. Bob Marley, One Love, Rocket Man, I Can Only Imagine, Ray, and A Complete Unknown round out the domestic list. We'll look at the worldwide list a little bit later. And this is a chart we've been looking at for the last several weeks. These are the highest grossing non-sequels of the 2020s. I define that as a movie that's not part of a cinematic universe and with no previous movies starring the characters in the film. Michael is now the 7th highest grossing non-sequel of the decade, ahead of Sound of Freedom, Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, and Hoppers. F1, Sinners, Project Hail Mary, Oppenheimer, a Minecraft movie, and Barbie are ahead of Michael. But what I love is that we have 3 movies now on this top 10 list that all came out within the last couple months, which means that audiences, yes, are going to see sequels, but they're also going to see films that are not necessarily tied to previous franchises. And that's another encouraging sign I see for the box office. Let's talk a little bit about the Super Mario Galaxy movie. This is a chart we've been looking at for the last 3 or 4 weeks. This is a day-by-day comparison of the Super Mario Brothers movie, a Minecraft movie, and Super Mario Galaxy. And what we basically have here with Minecraft and Super Mario Galaxy is they've merged into one line. The final domestic total for Super Mario Galaxy is going to be very close to what we saw with the Minecraft movie, but you can see the phenomenon that was Super Mario Brothers. After about 10 days, the legs on that movie were very strong, and it's just departing more and more from its sequel. It would have been nice to have a little bit more box office support for Super Mario Galaxy, even though it's done incredibly well. These are all 3 movies through 5 weekends of release, which gives a Minecraft movie a bit more even footing against the 2 Mario movies, which opened on Wednesday. But the result is the same. Again, Minecraft and Super Mario Galaxy have pretty much merged into one line, while Super Mario Brothers continues to pull away. This is another daily box office chart for Project Hail Mary and Oppenheimer. We've been talking about Project Hail Mary's legs here on the show for the past several weeks, and what we've seen now is a continuation of the trend that's been going on for the last couple weeks, where Project Hail Mary is now pulling ahead of Oppenheimer, and its final domestic gross is going to be probably $335, $340, $345 million, maybe even $350 if it really holds well, but it's going to have a lot of competition. But this, again, just goes to show you how long-term performance can help a movie leg out. Now, Oppenheimer also did great, but it's been interesting to see Project Hail Mary slowly close that gap and now start pulling slightly ahead of Oppenheimer. I said that I wanted to talk a little bit about Andy Serkis's Animal Farm. It didn't do particularly well at the box office. Now, this was not a movie that was made for Angel Studios. It was a movie that Angel Studios decided to distribute after it was made, but the audience that showed up to see it, at least on opening night, was not happy with what they saw. Cinema Score is something we talk about a lot on the show. It's a poll that's taken of opening night moviegoers, and Animal Farm received a C- Cinema Score from moviegoers, meaning that pretty much nobody that showed up was happy with what they saw. And to put that into perspective, that is the lowest score ever for an animated film that was polled by CinemaScore. Animated movies are usually CinemaScore proof. They might get a B, B-, but most people that go to see animated movies are younger audiences. They're going to be happy with what they see. They just might be a little bit more happy with a better movie. But this is the worst performance ever from an animated film, and I think it's because, number one, from what I've read, it's not a very good adaptation of Animal Farm, does not get the spirit of the story right, so people that knew the story and showed up to see it probably weren't too happy with it. Number two, it does have the Angel Studios branding on it, but this is nothing like the typical movie that comes from Angel Studios. Most of them are sort of faith-based or faith-oriented. This movie is not. So if you're a fan of the brand of Angel Studios and you show up to see the movie, you might not be happy with what you see. And then for people that just went to see the movie, again, this film got atrocious reviews. So this is a great example of how not to please anybody in your target audience. And Animal Farm, I mean, to see a C- score on an animated film, that is literally unprecedented. Let's do our first check-in with the 2026 summer domestic box office. Right now, The Devil Wears Prada 2 is the #1 movie of the summer at $76.7 million. And then the other wide releases from this weekend are currently top 10 films, including Hokum, Animal Farm, and Deep Water. Of course, this will be updated week by week. It's going to look dramatically different. And just as a reminder, these were my predictions for the summer box office. I predicted The Devil Wears Prada to be the 6th highest grossing movie of the summer. Right now, it's #1. So The Devil Wears Prada 2 is yellow on my Dan's predictions list because it's a movie I picked, but that is currently incorrectly placed against the actual summer box office. These things obviously change. The rest of my list has not come out yet. The next film that I did pick to be a top 10 summer movie will come out in a couple weeks, The Mandalorian and Grogu, which opens over Memorial Day weekend. Let's take a look now at the international box office, which is all markets outside of the US and Canada. And as strongly as The Devil Wears Prada 2 performed domestically, it did even better in other countries. It opened to $156.6 million. So a global audience for this film has been built over the years, not just a domestic one. Michael held well internationally. It dropped just 33.5% to bring in $80.85 million. And the Super Mario Galaxy movie dropped just 12.2%. That is partly or mostly because it opened in South Korea over the weekend. Friday was Labor Day in South Korea. Today is Children's Day in South Korea. So the movie was strategically positioned to open there. It's also Children's Day today in Japan, and they're at the end of Golden Week, which is a week where there are several observed holidays, and that's why Super Mario Galaxy opened in Japan last week. It's almost like the holiday Christmas season here in the United States. You want to put movies that you think are going to have big appeal when people have the time to go see them. And so we had a bit of a later release in Japan and in South Korea because this was a very advantageous window to release a movie like Super Mario Galaxy. In fourth place was Cold War 1994, which brought in $23.1 million. It's a Hong Kong action movie, the third installment of the Cold War series and also a prequel. And in fifth place was Vanishing Point, which brought in $22.8 million, another Chinese film about the search for a missing boy. This weekend kicked off the 5-day Labor Day holiday in China. So a big holiday season right now happening all across Asia. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with our domestic numbers, we get our top 5 films worldwide, and they're the same 5 movies in the same order. The Devil Wears Prada 2 opens to an official total of $233.3 million for the weekend. We'll see how that ranks as far as overall global openings in just a second. Michael dropping 38.2% globally to bring in another $135.2 million. It's getting close to the $500 million mark worldwide. The Super Mario Galaxy movie bringing in $44.3 million. It's about $3 million shy of $900 million, and we'll see if it can crawl its way across that $1 billion mark. And then Cold War 1994 and Vanishing Point rounding out the top 5. And when we look at worldwide opening weekends so far this year, the Super Mario Galaxy movie, #1 at $314.1 million, but The Devil Wears Prada 2 had the second best opening so far this year for any movie, ahead of Michael. It came in about $15 million ahead of Michael at $233.3 million. Just last week, Michael opened to $218.8 million. Then we have Pegasus 3 from China, the opening of Project Hail Mary, the opening of Scream 7, Hoppers, Wuthering Heights, Durandar the Revenge, and Blades of the Guardians. And looking at overall worldwide weekends, the opening weekends of Super Mario Galaxy, Devil Wears Prada, and Michael are numbers 1, 2, and 3. Then we have Avatar Fire and Ash from the first weekend of the year at $171 million. Then the opening of Pegasus 3. Then we have week 2 of Super Mario Galaxy, the opening of Project Hail Mary this past weekend for Michael, which was the 8th best weekend for any film worldwide this year. Then the second weekend of Project Hail Mary and the opening of Scream 7. And I said I was going to talk about music biopic grosses worldwide. Michael is now number 2 on this list as well, although it's much further behind Bohemian Rhapsody worldwide than it is domestically. Bohemian Rhapsody is number 1 with $911 million. Michael's at less than half that right now. I don't think it's going to get to where Bohemian Rhapsody is, but it's going to firmly be the second highest grossing music biopic worldwide. Elvis is in third place at $288.6 million. Then we have Straight Outta Compton at $201.6 million. That's heavily driven by the domestic box office. Rocket Man is in 5th place, followed by Walk the Line, Bob Marley, One Love, A Complete Unknown, Ray, and La Vie en Rose, which had a very low domestic total, but was very heavily attended worldwide. And even though it's out of the top 5 worldwide, the drama is now the 4th highest grossing A24 release ever at $116.7 million. That puts it ahead of Materialists. It's now behind Civil War, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Marty Supreme as far as the highest grossing A24 releases around the globe. By the way, I've seen several comments over the last couple weeks from folks saying that they would be interested in seeing an expanded worldwide box office. Right now, I do the top 5 worldwide every week. Some people say they'd like to see a top 10 like we have domestically. Personally, I think it might be a little bit too much as far as the international part of the show. But if you're interested in that, if you'd like to see an expanded top 10 worldwide, let me know, because I want to give you the show that you want to see, not just the show that I decide to make every single week. We have so much more to get to on this week's show, but before we do, I'm going to thank the sponsor for this week's episode, Factor. We've all been in this situation. It's the end of a long day. Maybe you've been outside, or it's just been a hard day at work. You're hungry, but the last thing you want to do is take the time to prepare a meal. It's a lot of work. Instead of getting something cheap, fast, and probably not great for you, let Factor take over instead. If hunger is a setup problem and not a willpower problem for you, then with Factor you have fresh, nutritious meals ready to eat in just 2 minutes. No matter what your goals are, Factor has meals built around them, whether it's weight loss, more protein, GLP-1 support, or, like me, just not eating as much bad stuff. Every meal is made with functional ingredients, lean proteins, whole foods, and healthy fats. With over 175 ingredients on Factor's banned list, like artificial colors and sweeteners, high fructose corn syrup, and refined seed oils. Factor meals are fresh, never frozen, with over 100 meals rotating weekly, including flavors from around the world like Mediterranean and Asian options. Factor shops, preps, cooks, and delivers your meals, so all you have to worry about is eating them. And if you're looking for a great breakfast option, try the smoky bacon and cheddar egg bites. They are a great way to start your day. Head to factormeals.com/Murrell50off and use code Murrell50off to get 50% off your order, plus free daily greens per box with new subscription only while supplies last until 9/27/2026. See the website for more details. That's factormeals.com/Murrell50off and the code Murrell50off. So we have the first weekend of the summer box office season behind us. We have week 2 coming up this weekend, and we have another big release hitting theaters, Mortal Kombat 2, trying to ride the wave of video game movies that we've seen over the past really 4 to 5 years. And that leads us to our Charts with Dan member poll question this week. Put on your prognostication future-telling hats, because I want to know if you think that Mortal Kombat 2 will open to more than $47.7 million and achieve one of the 10 highest video game movie openings of all time. Right now, Lara Croft Tomb Raider has that number 10 spot at $47.7 million. Do you think that Mortal Kombat 2 is going to make more than that? Some projections have it right around that point. Some projections have it higher. What do you think? Let me know. I will share the results on next week's show. And speaking of results from the member poll, last week, members, I asked you what you think the highest grossing domestic film of the summer will be, and the number one answer was a runaway. Spider-Man: Brand New Day won the poll with 66 votes. It's the movie I picked to be number 2. The movie I picked to be number 1 for the summer was Toy Story 5. It was in second place with 30 votes. The Odyssey came in third place with 11 votes, and then really almost no votes for any other film. Minions and Monsters got 2 votes, I'm pretty sure just to annoy me. One person has a lot of faith in Backrooms because they picked it to be the highest grossing domestic film of the summer. One person selected The Devil Wears Prada 2, and this is surprising to me. Only one person picked Moana to be the highest grossing domestic film of the summer. Now, I don't think it will be either, but it is somewhat telling to me that only one person thought that it would be, given that Moana is so popular and that Disney has done so well in the summer movie season in the past. Of course, Mortal Kombat 2 has Karl Urban joining the franchise, and this is nothing new for Karl Urban. It actually takes us to our trivia question for this week. Other than Mortal Kombat 2, Karl Urban has joined a franchise in its second film 3 other times. So there's one movie. The first direct sequel has Karl Urban joining the cast. What are those 3 movies? I'll give you a hint. Dredd does not count because Dredd was not a direct sequel to Judge Dredd. And keep in mind that Thor Ragnarok was not the second movie in the Thor series. So which 3 movies have featured Karl Urban joining a franchise in a part 2? I'll give you a second more to think about it, and here comes the answer. The answer is, this one was pretty easy, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. I think most people probably got that one. The Chronicles of Riddick, which was the second movie after Pitch Black, and The Bourne Supremacy, which even I forgot he was in, but he did play a major role in The Bourne Supremacy. And I don't know if this was a strategy on his part, but I'd say that it's worked out pretty well so far. So Mortal Kombat 2 now becoming the 4th film franchise that started off without Karl Urban and then found him in the sequel. Let's take a closer look at some of our domestic weekend numbers, and we'll start with the biggest theater changes from this past weekend. I predicted on last week's show that because The Devil Wears Prada 2 was entering theaters, because we had a lot of other wide openings, because Michael was doing so well, that we'd see some big theater losses this week, and I was correct. We had 4 films that lost more than 1,000 theaters. Normal pretty much ended its theatrical run in its 3rd week. It lost 1,656 theaters. It's now in just 134. Yumi and Tuscany lost 1,552 theaters. It's now in 563. Lee Cronin's The Mummy lost just over 1,200 theaters. The Drama lost over 1,100 theaters. It's now out of wide release, and that's why I said I don't think it's going to hit $50 million because it lost the bulk of its theaters, even though it was a top 5 film last weekend. And Hoppers lost 970 theaters. It's still in 1,030. These were the top per theater averages for the past weekend. The Devil Wears Prada 2 came in first place, bringing in an average of $18,493 per theater in each of its 4,150 theaters. Michael also doing extremely well on a per theater basis. It brought in $13,755 per theater in almost 4,000 theaters. So your average theater playing both Devil Wears Prada 2 and Michael bringing in about $31,000 over this past weekend just from those 2 movies alone. Bellissima comes in 3rd place in just 1 theater. This is a 4K restoration of director Luchino Visconti's 1951 film about a mother trying to get her daughter into the movie business. In 4th place was a 4K re-release of No Picnic, which also played in just 1 theater, bringing in $6,348. No Picnic is a 1987 film set in New York's East Village, featuring early appearances from Luis Guzman and Steve Buscemi. And in 5th place is Omaha, which expanded to 3 theaters and brought in $4,655 per theater. These were the top films in limited release this past weekend. At number 1, take a big breath here. That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, the movie, Tears of the Azure Sea, which brought in $947,000 in 837 theaters. At number 2 was The Story of Everything, which I believe was released through Fathom Events in 513 theaters. It brought in just over $800,000. The Story of Everything is a documentary on the origins of the universe that advocates that intelligent design was the source of everything around us. In 3rd place is the live stream of the Met Opera Eugene, I'm going to say Onegin, and then people can just laugh at me. It was in an unknown number of theaters and brought in $683,000. At number 4 was RZA's One Spoon of Chocolate, which opened in 636 theaters and brought in $558,000. And in 5th place in an unknown number of theaters was an Indian film. We often see this on the limited release chart, called Patriot. It's an Indian spy thriller in the Malayalam language. This is what the 2026 domestic box office looks like with The Devil Wears Prada put into the mix. Of course, the Super Mario Galaxy movie, still the number 1 movie of the year at over $400 million. Project Hail Mary in 2nd place at $318.3 million. Michael is up 3 spots from last week to be the 3rd highest grossing domestic film of the year at $184.2 million. It will be crossing the $200 million mark today or tomorrow. Hoppers is down 1 spot. Scream 7 down 1 spot to number 5. Goat down 1 spot to number 6. Wuthering Heights stays at number 7. The Devil Wears Prada 2 debuts as the 8th highest grossing film of the year domestically already, after just its opening weekend. Send Help is down 1 spot to number 9, and Reminders of Him is down 1 spot to number 10. The Drama off of the highest grossing domestic films of 2026 chart. This is what the domestic box office looks like when we look at all tickets sold since January 1st. And this is now mostly 2026 movies. Avatar Fire and Ash, though, still the 5th highest grossing film of the year since January 1st at $153.9 million made since January 1. Zootopia 2 also still on the list at number 8 at just over $90 million, but they are the only two 2025 releases left on this chart. And this is the 2026 worldwide box office. The Super Mario Galaxy movie at number 1, getting close to $900 million. Pegasus 3 is currently at number 2, but Project Hail Mary is gunning for that spot and should be there by next week. Michael is up 2 spots to be the 4th highest grossing film of the year at $430.2 million, and it will also be moving up this list. Hopper's down 1 spot to number 5. Wuthering Heights is down to number 6. The Devil Wears Prada 2 debuts as the 7th highest grossing film worldwide, already at $233.3 million. Scream 7, Blades of the Guardians, and Scare Out are down 1 spot to numbers 8, 9, and 10, and GOAT is off of the worldwide box office list for 2026. So between last week's show and this week's show, we hit the end of April and started the month of May. And at the end of every month, I like to update the box office so far this year to show you which studio is selling the most tickets, or at least making the most money, and also how we're doing so far this year compared to previous years. So let's start first with the studios that have the biggest market share as far as all tickets sold since January 1st. This is what the chart looked like back at the end of March, with Disney leading the way at 27.8% market share and indie studios in second place at 20.1% market share. But there have been some big changes since the end of March. So let's take a look at the latest numbers. And this does include the most recent weekend. So it includes the opening of The Devil Wears Prada 2. Disney is still the number 1 studio, but it's down almost 7% from the end of March. It has 21% market share. Universal jumps up from last place to second place, and that is pretty much all Super Mario. Universal now with an 18.7% market share. Indie studios are down to third place with 18.4%. That's a small decrease from last month's numbers. Amazon MGM pretty much stays the same in fourth place at 14.1% market share. Lionsgate had a sizable jump. It now has a 10.8% market share of all tickets sold this year. Sony down about 3.7%. They've sold 6% of all tickets sold. Again, they really kind of sat out much of the year so far. And then the two studios that are looking to merge, Paramount and Warner Brothers, the bottom 2 studios right now, at just over 10% market share. Again, they've sat out most of 2026 so far, but it's just kind of crazy to see so many plans being made for these studios and releasing 30 films a year. And here we are at the beginning of May, and combined, they have 10% market share. Obviously, they have big releases coming up later this year, but they are literally starting out at the bottom. This is what the cumulative box office looks like so far this year. Now, this is only through the end of April, so this does not include this past weekend's numbers. And we continue to have a good 2026. Right now, we're up a little under $250 million from where we were this time last year. That's actually down, though. At the end of March, we were up about $284 million. And that's due to the fact that we did not have as big an April this year as we did last year. But I think that we did a really respectable job. I was worried that there was actually going to be a big drop because there were so many big hits in April 2025. We were able to more or less keep pace in 2026. At a box office total of $2.55 billion through the end of April, we're about $250 million ahead of 2025, about $500 million ahead of 2024. Now we're behind where we were at the end of April 2023, and that's because of Super Mario Brothers. It was a massive hit. It really boosted those box office grosses, but we are sizably ahead of where we were in 2022, obviously way ahead of 2021 and 2020. But again, you can see just how much the business has declined since COVID really shut everything down in 2020. Because in 2019, at the end of April, we were at $3.44 billion. In 2018, we were at $3.86 billion. Having Avengers movies in April of those 2 years definitely helped. We were at $3.72 billion at the end of April 2017 and $3.56 billion at the end of April 2016. So we continue to see an increase over last year's box office, but we are not really having so far a breakout year in the sense of, oh, this is better than any year since COVID. And 2023 is going to be hard to keep pace with for the next few months because Barbenheimer was that summer. It'll be tough to match those numbers in the summer box office. Where I think we're going to have a lot of chance to make up some ground is at the end of the year, because if you remember, there were a lot of films that were pulled from release at the end of 2023 due to the actors' strike and the writers' strike. We should have a robust holiday release schedule. We will have a robust holiday release schedule this year. And so I think that's the next place where we could really make up some substantial ground. So those are all the numbers I have for you as far as box office. Before we go, I also want to take a look at the world of streaming, and we'll start as we always do with the latest numbers from Netflix. New ones will be out later today, but these are the numbers from April 20th through the 26th. The most watched program on Netflix was Apex, which brought in 38.21 million views. That is the Charlize Theron, Taron Egerton film. The Netflix film 180 comes in second place at 17.49 million views. The Netflix film Roommates comes in third place at just over 12 million views. Then we have the Netflix original series Unchosen Season 1 in fourth place at 10.42 million views. This is a Netflix original series about a woman escaping from a cult. The shark thriller Thrash, that's a bit of a tongue twister, is in fifth place at 9.63 million views. Then we have Running Point Season 2, the return of the Kate Hudson series, at number 6 at 5.27 million views. The Netflix series Sold Out on You, which is from South Korea, in seventh place at 4.72 million views. Untold, the shooting at Hawthorne Hill, which is a real-life sports/crime documentary about a murder involving a dressage student and a decorated Olympian, comes in eighth place at 4.54 million views. K-pop Demon Hunters in the top 10 at 4.2 million views. It's coming in and out, as it often does, on lower viewed weeks. And Ronaldinho, the one and only, rounding out the top 10 at 4.13 million views. Now, something that's worth noting is that there was a Stranger Things spin-off show, animated show, called Stranger Things Tales from 85 that was released in this window. It was not one of the 10 most viewed programs on Netflix, nor was it even the number one viewed show on Netflix for that window, which I think is interesting because, Stranger Things just ended in January. It's not like it's been 2 or 3 years. The show just ended, and yet the first major spinoff of that show doesn't even make the top 10 overall for Netflix. And this is following up on Beef Season 2, also not making the overall top 10. Last year, I said that K-pop Demon Hunters took a lot of heat off of Netflix because it was such a phenomenal success. That's all anyone paid attention to. This year, with One Piece, with Beef, with Stranger Things, Tales from 85, I think that we have seen over and over that Netflix is having a tough time maintaining viewership and enthusiasm. I'm sure there are a lot of enthusiastic and passionate fans of these franchises, but I mean widespread viewership, passion, and enthusiasm for their quote-unquote flagship franchises, and Stranger Things is just the latest example of that. Apex had the third best debut for a Netflix movie this year, a new Netflix film, at 38.21 million views. That comes in just behind the debut of War Machine and the debut of The Rip, which opened to 41.58 million views on its first week on the service. Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man, and Joe's College Road Trip round out the top 5. And as far as overall movie weeks this year, Apex comes in fifth place behind the first week of War Machine, the first 2 weeks of The Rip, and the second week of War Machine. So 5 slots, 3 movies as far as the best performances on Netflix for any movie this year. These are the 10 most watched programs on Netflix in 2026. Apex did well enough to come in at number 10 after just a few days on the service at 38.21 million views. Then we have One Piece Season 2 at 39.59 million views. Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man at number 8. People We Meet on Vacation at number 7. Thrash at number 6 with 81.84 million views. K-pop Demon Hunters, still the 5th most watched program on the service this year at just over 90 million views. His and Hers is at number 4. Bridgerton Season 4 is at number 3. The Rip is at number 2. And War Machine at number 1 with 128.41 million views. Let's take a look now at the latest numbers from Nielsen. Now, unlike the Netflix numbers we just saw, these are domestic only, and the numbers are delayed by about a month because that's when we get them from Nielsen. So this covers the week of March 30th through April 5th. And we'll look first at the most watched streaming movies, according to Nielsen. At number 1 is Crime 101, which opened up with 11.6 million hours watched. This was the sort of pipeline of theaters to streaming for Amazon MGM. Anaconda comes in second place at 11.26 million hours watched. Then we have Zootopia 2, Mercy, another Amazon theaters to streaming pipeline movie. 28 years later, The Bone Temple comes in fifth place at 4.93 million hours watched. I was hoping more people would discover it on streaming, but that doesn't really seem to be happening yet. Untold, The Death and Life of Lamar Odom debuts in sixth place, followed by The Truth and Tragedy of Moriah Wilson. Minions, The Rise of Gru comes in eighth place. As I mentioned on last week's show, K-pop Demon Hunters exited the top 10 on the previous list, but it's back in the top 10 now at number 9 with 3.8 million hours watched. And Madagascar coming in at number 10 with 3.63 million hours watched. These were the most watched streaming shows for March 30th through April 5th. And for the first time, The Pit is the most watched show across all streaming services at 19.38 million hours watched. This was as it was approaching the end of its most recent season. So congrats to The Pit. It's been steadily moving up this list. Love on the Spectrum US returns at number 2 at 14.41 million hours watched, followed by the debut of Something Very Bad Is Going to Happen on the top 10 list at 13.68 million hours watched. Grey's Anatomy, Bluey, The Big Bang Theory, Paradise, and Family Guy are numbers 4 through 8. Invincible returns to the top 10 at number 9, and Virgin River rounds out the top 10. And these were the top 20 shows as far as watch time per available episode. So you take the hours watched for each show divided by the number of episodes you can watch. That's how you get this number. Something Very Bad Is Going to Happen comes in at number 1 with 1.71 million hours of watch time per episode. The Madison coming in second place at 1.35 million hours per episode. Then we have Paradise at 700,000 hours per episode. The Pit coming in at 692,000 hours per episode. Love on the Spectrum, number 5. One Piece still in the top 10 at number 6. Invincible at number 7. Exo Kitty at number 8. Beauty in Black at number 9. And Virgin River at number 10. And those are all the numbers I have for you this week. Before we go, though, I just wanted to mention a few things that you might want to check out both at home and in theaters this upcoming week. First of all, as I mentioned today, The Drama will be available for purchase and premium video on demand, which are those higher priced rentals. So if you didn't catch it in theaters and you want to watch it at home, you can starting today. Ready or Not 2, also available today for purchase and premium video on demand. Tomorrow, Citadel Season 2 debuts on Amazon Prime. All 7 episodes of the second season will debut. You may not have heard of this show, but it is literally one of the most expensive TV shows ever. Season 1 debuted 3 years ago to not great ratings. Now we have Season 2. We'll see if anybody cares about this season. On Thursday, Send Help will be hitting streaming on Hulu. Send Help came out while I was at Sundance, and I never actually had a chance to see it, so I very well may be watching it at home this weekend because I do want to check it out. I heard it was very good. Then this upcoming weekend in theaters, of course, we have Mortal Kombat 2. That is the biggest release as far as summer box office implications go. The Sheep Detectives also opens in theaters this weekend. Hugh Jackman plays a shepherd who teaches his sheep inadvertently how to solve crimes. The movie is written by Craig Mazin, and it also stars Emma Thompson with a voice cast that includes Bryan Cranston, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Regina Hall, and Patrick Stewart. Billie Eilish, Hit Me Hard and Soft, The Tour, live in 3D, will be in theaters this weekend. It is a concert film that was co-directed by Billie Eilish and James Cameron. Yes, that James Cameron, who used some of the 3D technology that he developed for Avatar to shoot this concert film. So this will probably be the most incredible looking concert film of all time in 3D. And if you missed Greenland 2 Migration in theaters, and I'd say most people did, it will be debuting on HBO Max this Friday. And that's all I have for you. I know it was jam-packed with information this week, so I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Thank you to Factor for sponsoring this episode. Be sure to stay tuned right here on the channel. I did a video yesterday about the new Oscar rules that were announced. I'll have a review for Mortal Kombat 2 coming up on Friday. For people that might ask, where's your Mortal Kombat 2 review? Because I'm sure the review embargo drops soon. As I've said many times on the show before, I am happy to go to any regional screening that's made available to me, but studios more and more are not making regional screenings available to critics that don't live in Los Angeles or New York. So I have no opportunity to see it early. I will be there on Thursday afternoon. I'll check the movie out. I'll have my review out to you on Friday morning, plus any other crazy stuff that happens over the next week. You can look for something here on the channel. But more than watching anything that I might be making in the future, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.